AITA for leaving my girlfriend on vacation after she confessed to cheating? My name is Jacob. I'm 27 years old, and for 3 years I was in a relationship with my girlfriend Hannah, who is 26. Until recently, I was convinced that our relationship was solid and stable. I thought I had finally found the person with whom I could build my future, but in a matter of minutes, everything I thought was secure began to crumble. I met Hannah a little over 3 years ago at a college networking event for dietetic students. At that time, she was finishing her degree and I was already working at a digital marketing firm. From the first time we spoke, she seemed like a very sweet, polite, somewhat shy, and quite reserved young woman. She wasn't the type of person who immediately drew attention, but she had a way of expressing herself and looking at you that felt incredibly sincere. Getting close to her at first wasn't that simple. I remember she once told me, almost laughing, that her parents were very strict. According to her, they had never allowed her to have a boyfriend and probably wouldn't approve of her dating someone either. At first, I thought she was exaggerating or saying it half-jokingly. But over time, I understood that she was completely serious. Her family is very devoutly religious. Hannah lived at home with her parents and her 2 younger brothers. Several times she told me that her mother always repeated to her that she had to remain pure until marriage. That surprised me a bit, not because I wanted to judge her, but because I thought those kinds of ideas were no longer so common nowadays. But for Hannah, those rules were part of her life. She had a strict curfew. She could almost never stay over at a friend's house, and she rarely went out to places other than the university or her church. Despite everything, we decided to try having a relationship. One winter day, I formally asked her to be my girlfriend. We were sitting on a park bench. It was quite cold, but I felt calm in that moment. When I asked her, she started crying, hugged me, and told me she didn't know how she was going to hide our relationship from her parents, but that she didn't want to lose me either. It was a very sincere moment. The first months of our relationship were somewhat complicated. Many times we had to see each other in secret. Sometimes Hannah would tell her parents she was going to a study group with a friend just to be able to see me for a couple of hours. There were also days when she canceled our plans because her mom suspected something. I tried to understand her situation. I didn't want to pressure her or get her in trouble with her family. I cared about her too much to demand something that could cause conflicts at home. As time passed, we got used to that dynamic. We became quite good at finding discreet places and short moments to see each other. It wasn't easy, but somehow those difficulties also brought us closer. I felt proud to be with someone who seemed so loyal and committed to our relationship. Hannah used to say that I was her first real boyfriend. She also assured me that she had never been with anyone before. She even told me that she was still a virgin. For me, that wasn't the most important thing. It wasn't something for which I valued her more or less. But it did make me feel that our relationship was honest, without a complicated history. Over the years, things started to become more stable. Hannah started her own practice as a registered dietitian and little by little began getting clients and projects. Even though she still lived with her parents, she no longer depended on them as much financially. During that time, we talked several times about the idea of moving in together. She said she wanted to, but that she needed more time because she was worried about her family's reaction. I tried not to insist too much, although inside I really wanted to take that step. Finally, a few months ago, we decided to talk about it more seriously. I proposed renting a small 1-bedroom apartment near where we both worked. It wasn't a large or luxurious place, but it was enough to start. At that moment, Hannah got very excited, hugged me, and said yes. However, a few weeks later she started acting insecure. She told me her parents would never accept something like that, and that if they found out, they would probably cut her off completely. I tried to convince her. I reminded her that she was already 26 years old and an adult. I told her she didn't need anyone's approval to live her own life. I also explained that she wasn't doing anything wrong, that she simply wanted to share her life with me. She smiled, but her eyes showed guilt. My parents wouldn't understand, she kept repeating to me. Despite that, we continued with the plan. We decided that little by little she would start bringing some of her things to the apartment, and that later she would tell her parents she was moving for a job opportunity, without telling them the whole truth. It wasn't the best solution, but it seemed like the only one possible. 2 weeks ago, we planned a little getaway to the coast. It was nothing fancy, just a weekend trip to relax and spend time together. Hannah knew her parents would never approve of her traveling with me, so she told them she was attending a nutrition conference. I didn't really like the idea of her lying, but she insisted it was the only way. The first day of the trip was perfect. We checked into the hotel, walked along the beach, and then had dinner at a small oceanfront restaurant. Hannah seemed relaxed and happy. She laughed easily, and for a moment seemed completely free of worries. I really liked that version of her. That night we had a couple of glasses of wine, nothing excessive. But the next day, during dinner, she decided to drink more. I don't usually drink much, and neither does she. However, that night something was different. Hannah started drinking too much. At first, I found it amusing to see her talking louder than usual, because her voice is normally very soft. She told stories from her childhood and laughed at simple things. But then the situation started to change. We were at the hotel bar. There was a live band, and some people were dancing. Suddenly, Hannah climbed onto a table, laughing and throwing her arms in the air as some people at nearby tables applauded. I was in shock. I didn't know whether to laugh or worry. She shouted my name between laughs, as if it was all a game. But I felt uncomfortable. Not because of what she was doing in front of others, but because that behavior was nothing like the Hannah I knew. She wasn't the same person. I approached and took her carefully by the arm. I asked her to get down from the table, but she refused. I told her she was drawing too much attention and could get hurt. She just laughed. "You're just like my dad, always telling me what to do," she told me. That stung a little. I tried to stay calm. I helped her down from the table and told her it was best to go back to the room. As we walked, she kept arguing with me. She said I was boring, that I didn't know how to have fun, and that I always wanted to control everything. When we got to the room, the argument continued. She started yelling things at me that made little sense. They were criticisms and accusations she had never mentioned to me before. In the midst of that sudden anger, she said something that left me completely frozen. "You know what?" she said with a heavy voice. "Now I'm going to have to lie to you and do things behind your back, just like I do with my parents." Then she added something worse. "And later don't complain if I'm unfaithful to you again." That word hit me like a ton of bricks. "What did you say?" I asked her, unable to believe what I had just heard. She looked at me for a moment, as if she was just realizing what she had said. Then she simply shrugged. "Forget it," she muttered. "Let me sleep." But I couldn't let it go. "What do you mean by again?" I insisted. "What are you talking about, Hannah?" She let out a long sigh, clearly irritated that I kept asking. She turned her head toward me and, slurring her words a bit from the alcohol, replied, "Well, yes, just so you know, I was with someone else once. A long time ago, when we were just starting to date." She paused briefly and added indifferently, "But it's in the past now." After saying that, she rolled over in bed and covered herself with the comforter, as if the conversation was over. I was left completely paralyzed. I felt the air disappear from my lungs. I didn't know what to say or what to do. It was as if the ground had opened up beneath my feet. I spent several minutes watching her as she fell asleep. A part of me wanted to convince myself it wasn't real. I thought maybe she had said it because she was drunk, that maybe it had just been a meaningless comment. But another part of me knew that alcohol often just brings to the surface things that a person normally hides. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake writing all this down, trying to organize my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her words again. I felt a knot in my chest. I thought about all the years we had been together, all the times she told me I was her first everything, the trust one always believed existed between us. I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been a lie. I didn't know what to do. At times I felt like getting up, packing my things, and leaving the hotel without looking back. But another part of me needed to hear her side of the story when she was sober. I needed to know if what she said was true or just the result of a night of heavy drinking. Although I also knew that if I asked her in the morning, she would probably deny it. Maybe she would say she didn't remember anything or that she spoke without thinking. But what if that wasn't the case? What if she had really been with someone else and decided to hide it all these years? That thought kept spinning in my head. Outside, the constant sound of the ocean could be heard. To me, that noise seemed like a reminder of what was happening, of the uncomfortable silence that now existed between us. While she slept peacefully, I felt that something inside me had broken forever. I didn't know what I was going to do when she woke up. The only thing I was sure of was that no matter what happened, nothing would ever be the same. Update. I'm now writing this from the apartment we were supposed to rent together. I arrived a few hours ago. The place is still practically empty, but somehow it reflects very well how I feel inside. Empty, aimless, as if everything has lost its meaning. The following morning at the hotel was one of the worst of my life. I didn't sleep at all. I spent the whole night staring at the ceiling, replaying over and over again what Hannah had said. When dawn finally broke, the sunlight started filtering through the room's curtains. She was still asleep as if nothing had happened. I, on the other hand, was on the verge of a panic attack. I felt anger, sadness, and enormous confusion. I didn't know whether to wake her up to talk or just leave without saying anything, but I needed answers. I couldn't stay with that doubt consuming me from the inside. I woke her up gently. Hannah slowly opened her eyes and looked at me normally. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. I watched her for a few seconds, trying to find some sign in her expression that would explain what happened the night before. But I didn't see anything. "Hannah," I said with a tense voice, "I need you to tell me the truth about something you said last night." She frowned, still half asleep. "What are you talking about?" "Last night," I repeated. "When we were arguing, you said you had been unfaithful to me." She stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then she let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, Jacob, you must have dreamed it." "I didn't say that." "Yes, you did," I replied firmly. "You clearly said not to complain if you were unfaithful to me again. And when I asked you, you admitted you had already done it." Hannah shook her head, looking confused. "No, I don't remember saying anything like that." She paused and added, "I had too much to drink, Jacob. You know that when people drink, they can say stupid things." "That wasn't a stupid thing," I interrupted her. "You were very specific. You said it happened a long time ago when we were just starting to date." I looked at her closely. For a moment, a flash of nervousness crossed her face. She looked down and started fidgeting with the bedsheets. "Jacob, please," she said in a low voice. "Let's not start with things that make no sense. I don't want to ruin the day." That response made me lose my composure. "What makes no sense?" I replied, my voice cracking. "Do you realize what you're saying? If that's true, then our entire relationship is based on a lie." She started breathing faster. Her expression changed immediately. "Don't say it like that," she whispered. "Like what?" I asked, feeling my heart racing. Then she looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. "Hannah, please, just tell me the truth," I begged her. "Were you with someone else or not?" She stayed silent. Her breathing was shaky. She looked at me with fear, as if she knew everything was about to collapse. Finally, she could no longer maintain the lie. "Yes," she finally said, crying. I felt a punch in the stomach. Her words pierced me like a knife. "When?" I asked with a hollow voice. "It was a long time ago," she answered between sobs. "When we had barely been dating for 2 months." I stayed silent. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. "Explain it to me," I managed to say. Hannah took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "One night, I told my parents I was going to sleep at a friend's house," she began. "But actually, that friend had invited me to a party." She paused to wipe her tears. "I almost never went out, and I wanted to do it just that once. I thought nothing would happen." She stopped again for a moment. "At that party, I ran into someone, an ex-boyfriend." I interrupted her immediately. "What do you mean, an ex-boyfriend?" I asked in disbelief. "Didn't you tell me I was your first real boyfriend? Didn't you say you had never had a partner?" She avoided looking at me. Her hands were shaking. "I lied to you," she said almost in a whisper. "You weren't my first boyfriend." I felt as if the floor was moving beneath my feet. "So, the part about your past, that was a lie too?" I asked, in a tone that even hurt me to hear. Hannah slowly closed her eyes and nodded. "I was afraid," she said through tears. "When I met you, you were very different from the other guys I had dated before. You were mature, responsible, and you always treated me well. I was afraid that if I told you the whole truth, you would think I was an easy person or that I wasn't worth it." She paused before adding, "I didn't want you to judge me." I could barely process what I was hearing. For 3 years I had heard the same story over and over again. 3 years believing in a version of her that now seemed to have never existed. "So it was all a lie," I told her with a dry voice. "No, Jacob, it wasn't like that," she answered quickly, almost begging. "Everything else was real. I truly loved you." She took a deep breath before continuing. "What happened was a mistake, something very stupid. I felt horrible afterward. You don't know how long I've carried this guilt. And you think that fixes anything? I replied. I stared at her. Saying it now, 3 years later. Does it erase what you did? Hannah covered her face with her hands while she cried. I've suffered too, she said with a cracking voice. I've lived with the fear that someday you would find out. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I replied, unable to hold back my own tears. You lied to me from the beginning. I felt a pain I didn't know how to describe. You made me believe I was someone special to you, that I was the first in everything, and in the end, I just turned out to be the next one. She tried to get closer as if she wanted to hug me, but I pulled away immediately. I couldn't bear having her near me. Inside me, everything was a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment, even disgust. Jacob, please, she told me between sobs. Don't throw away our relationship over something that happened so long ago. I've changed. I'm not the same person I was before. You didn't change, I replied without looking at her. You just learned to lie better. After that, she fell silent. For a few seconds, the only thing that could be heard was her crying in the room. Then, as if she were desperate to fix something that was beyond repair, she said something that left me completely paralyzed. Look, let's make a deal, she said suddenly, looking up. She stared directly into my eyes. If you really can't get over this, then I'll let you be with someone else once. I didn't understand what I was hearing. Right here in the hotel, she continued. Find any girl you want. She gestured toward the door. I'll leave the room, all to yourself. Then she added, that way we'll be even. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. What? I asked, stunned. She wiped away her tears, still trembling. Just once, she repeated, so that we're at peace. She took a deep breath before saying, after that, we can start over without any guilt. I stared at her, trying to understand how she could even think of something like that. Do you really think that would fix anything? I asked her, do you think turning this into a simple exchange of betrayals would make us even? She didn't answer. She looked down, clearly ashamed. Then I said something I never thought I would say to her. You disgust me, Hannah. My voice sounded cold. Disgust for lying, for pretending for so long, and for thinking that all of this can be balanced out with something so hollow. Without saying anything else, I grabbed my suitcase. She started crying harder and tried to stop me. She begged me not to leave her, to talk it out calmly, but for me, there was nothing left to discuss. I walked out of the hotel without looking back. During the drive to the airport, I could barely focus on what was happening around me. My head was in chaos. Memories appeared one after another, but now they all seemed different. Every moment we had lived together had another meaning. I no longer knew which part of our story had been real and which had been fabricated. I bought a ticket for the first available flight back to my city. During the trip, I didn't speak to anyone. I just looked out the airplane window trying to find some explanation for all of this, but there was none. When I finally arrived at the apartment, that place where we were supposed to start our life together, I felt an enormous sadness. The empty walls, the unopened boxes, the new key in my hand. Everything was ready for a future that no longer existed. I sat on the floor and started to cry. I don't remember the last time I had cried like that. It wasn't just because of the infidelity. It was because of the lie, the time I felt I had wasted, the illusion that had been shattered. What hurt me the most was thinking that the person I trusted the most was also the one who ended up hurting me the most. Now I understand something I didn't see before. Betrayal doesn't just hurt because of the act itself. It hurts because of what it destroys. It's not just a physical deception. It's the collapse of trust, of the image you had of the other person. Since I arrived, Hannah hasn't stopped texting me. She sends me messages asking for forgiveness. She says she made a mistake, that she doesn't want to lose me. So far, I haven't answered her. I don't know if I ever will. A part of me wants to erase her completely from my life, as if she had never existed. But another part, the weakest one, still misses her. I miss our routine, the good morning texts, the laughs, those little things that gave my day meaning. It's strange how a single truth can change the meaning of all your memories. Now even the happy moments seem fake. I don't know what will happen from now on. For the moment, I just want silence. I don't want advice, or revenge, or forced reconciliations. I just need to understand how a person rebuilds themselves when they discover that the one they loved wasn't who they claimed to be. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust in the same way again, but I do know one thing. I don't deserve to keep carrying the weight of someone else's lie. Update. It has been 5 days since I returned from the trip. I still find it hard to process everything that happened. I'm not sleeping well, and although I try to distract myself with work, every corner of this apartment reminds me of the plans we had, and that will now no longer exist. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the space where we planned to put the sofa or the corner where she wanted to place her desk. All of that feels strange now, as if those plans had belonged to another life. Last night, I received a message from her. She told me she needed to come by for some things she had left here. She assured me she just wanted to pick them up and nothing else. I hesitated before answering her, but in the end, I did. I didn't want to give her an excuse to keep contacting me. I told her she could come in the morning. I would let her in, and then I would leave. We agreed on a time. Today at 10:30, I arrived at the apartment. I hadn't slept at all, and my stomach was in knots. An uncomfortable mix of nerves and annoyance. I opened the windows to let some air in. I tried to convince myself that I didn't care, but the anxiety was still there. About 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of her car. I walked over to the window and saw her park. She got out of her car wearing dark sunglasses. She was in simple clothes, no makeup, and her hair was tied back in a ponytail. She looked tired. She walked into the apartment without saying much at all. She barely muttered a hello. I responded with a dry greeting, keeping my distance. She walked straight to the bedroom, or rather, to the room that was going to be hers. She began to gather some things, a box of books, some clothes, and a small vase we had bought together. Inside the apartment, there was no conversation. The only sound that filled the place was the opening and closing of drawers as she packed her things. I tried to distract myself by looking at my phone, although in reality, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every little noise made me tense. After a few minutes, I heard her tape the box shut. Shortly after, she walked over to where I was. "I'm done," she said without looking at me. I nodded in silence. She picked up the box with her things and walked out of the apartment. I looked down, trying not to think about anything, but a few minutes later I heard someone coming back up the stairs. Then there was a knock on the door. I opened it. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I forgot something," she replied. But I noticed right away that she wasn't carrying keys or anything in her hands. "What did you forget?" I asked suspiciously. She hesitated for a moment. "I actually didn't forget anything," she finally admitted. "I just wanted to talk to you one last time." I shook my head. "There's nothing else to talk about." "Jacob, please," she insisted. "Just give me a few minutes." "No," I answered firmly. "I don't want to talk to you." I tried to close the door, but she blocked it with her hand. She looked directly at me. Her eyes were full of desperation. "Just listen to me," she said. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, just to listen to me." I sighed with exhaustion. I turned around and replied, "I already listened to you once. I have nothing left to hear." I started walking toward the inside of the apartment, but suddenly she caught up to me. She grabbed my arm, and before I could react, she pushed me against the wall. Then she kissed me. It was a rough, desperate kiss, completely out of place. I pushed her away immediately. "What are you doing?" I yelled at her, but she didn't seem to hear me. She tried to get closer again, with tears streaming down her face. "You're mine, Jacob," she kept repeating between sobs. "You're mine." Her voice sounded frantic. "We are going to live together. We are going to get married. You love me. I know you do." She tried to hug me, but I stopped her by holding her shoulders. "Enough," I told her firmly. "Stop, Hannah." She looked at me with red eyes and heavy breathing. "You can't leave me like this," she said. "All of this can't end over something that happened years ago. You can't destroy everything we built." "You already did that," I replied. "You ruined it when you decided to lie to me." She shook her head in frustration. "For God's sake, Jacob, that's in the past." "It is in the past," she yelled. "So why does it affect you so much?" She stepped a little closer. "Weren't you happy with me all this time?" "That changes nothing," I replied coldly. "Of course it does," she shot back quickly. Her voice began to rise. "You were happy. I know you were. You can't deny that you loved me, that you liked being with me, that you enjoyed our nights, our laughs, our affection." She paused briefly. "Or are you going to say you didn't enjoy being intimate with me either?" Her tone was now defiant. She looked at me with a strange mix of pride, anger, and shame. I observed her in silence for a few seconds. I couldn't recognize her. The woman standing in front of me seemed like a completely different person. She was no longer the girl crying and saying she was afraid of losing me. She was someone else, someone desperate, broken, clinging to a story that no longer existed. "You're a different person," I finally said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I don't know who you are, but I don't recognize you." She looked down when she heard me. "Don't say that," she whispered. "I'm the same, Jacob." "No," I interrupted her. I took a deep breath before continuing. "The woman I loved didn't lie, didn't manipulate, and didn't try to fix everything with a desperate kiss." I stared at her. That woman only existed in my head. I stayed quiet for a moment and added, "You aren't her." Hannah looked up with a mix of sadness and anger. "You're being cruel," she said with a trembling voice. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm just being honest." I paused, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to say it. "I don't want to see you again." She took a step back. Her eyes were full of tears. "So is this it?" she asked. "This ended the day you decided to lie to me," I replied. For a moment, I thought she would start crying again, but she didn't. She straightened up slowly, took a deep breath, and then said in a cold tone, "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." I didn't understand what she meant by that. I didn't answer. I just watched her pick up her box, open the door, and walk out of the apartment without looking back. I heard her footsteps going down the stairs, then the sound of her car engine starting. I stood still, staring at the closed door. The apartment was silent. Suddenly, I felt something unexpected, calm. A tranquility I hadn't felt in days. For the first time in a long time, I was no longer afraid of being alone. I sat on the floor, took a deep breath, and looked around. This place that previously seemed empty to me now felt different. It was no longer a space full of painful memories. It was a beginning, a blank page. I thought about everything that had happened, about how a relationship that seemed perfect had crumbled in such a short time, about how a person can hide so many things behind a smile. But above all, I thought about myself, about everything I had tolerated for love, about how many signs I ignored just out of fear of losing someone. Now I understand something important. Sometimes loving doesn't mean staying. Sometimes loving also means letting go, accepting that the person you thought you knew no longer exists, or perhaps never did. As the sunlight came through the window and filled the room, I felt a freedom I hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to check my phone or wait for a message. I didn't have to justify anything. It was just me, my breathing, and a silence that, instead of hurting, finally gave me peace. Maybe later on, remembering all this will hurt again. Maybe someday I will regret some decisions. But today, at least today, I know I did the right thing. Because sometimes it's not about winning or losing a relationship. Sometimes it's simply about regaining your dignity, and with it, your freedom. Comment. I know this story might feel very personal to many of you. It's a powerful reminder that your peace and dignity are non-negotiable. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to draw a firm line. Walking away isn't about giving up. It's about choosing yourself. You can't control another person's choices, but you can always control your response. Healing often begins in the quiet moments after you decide you deserve better. Remember to be gentle with yourself during these difficult times. True strength is found in rebuilding your life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. I hope this inspires you to always choose the path that leads to your well-being. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.